We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hello listeners, this is Paula Schaffner with episode 24, Mork's Best Friend. This first aired on May 10th, 1979. The IMDb synopsis is, Mork gets a pet caterpillar, Exidor begins preaching about reincarnation. This was directed by Howard Storm, the 16th of 59 Mork and Mindy episodes. It was written by Simon Muntner, who didn't write anything else for Mork and Mindy, although he did do one Angie episode. He did various shows between 1973 and 2001, including MASH. We start with the nighttime exterior of the house. Mork is begging Mindy to let him keep what followed him home. Mindy says she dreads these kind of questions.
It's real cute. Mm-hmm. It's fuzzy. Mm-hmm. It's about this tall.
A dog that's been run over by a truck?
Oh, Minnie, that's so sick. Squash dogs can't follow you home. Look! It's a kitty pillar!
Oh, that's a caterpillar.
Not for a few weeks yet. It hasn't got hair in its chest.
No, they're always called caterpillars.
Oh, idiot moi.
Mork says he likes to call the caterpillar Bob. He says that she looked up when he said her name. Mindy says that isn't her head. Mork says that he thought that she was smiling at him. So a little bit of a naughty line, and it will actually come back. He tells Bob to go for a walk in the candy dish. He hopes she's not hypoglycemic. Mindy wonders how a caterpillar followed him home. He said he had to walk real slow and like this, and he mimes walking like a bug. Mindy asks how he knows it's a girl. Mork says, "Are you kidding, with a body like that?" Mindy says that it's a lovely insect, and they make a lovely couple. She's going to a French class tonight, so she has to go change. She suggests he show Bob the rest of the house. After she exits, Mork tells Bob to not get mad and says that she'll like Mindy once she gets to know her. He says that Mindy is just a little jealous because she doesn't have a fur coat like Bob's. Mork tells Bob to relax and sit down. Put up your feet, put up your feet, put up your feet. There's a knock, and he says he'll be right back and calls Bob Mon petit fuzz. He suggests that Bob slip into something more silky, like she's a silkworm, I guess. It's Exidor, so they do the Mork Exidor thing. Exidor says that he is Exidor in this life, which is hinting at the reincarnation thing. Exidor tells his followers that this is a private conversation, and he wants them to wait on the moped. He says that entourages can be the pits. Mork wants to introduce Exidor to his insect, but Exidor wants to do that later. Exidor sits on top of the couch, even though he's wearing boots, and Mork sits on the arm. Exidor came here to preach the only true religion. Mork wonders what the only true religion is this time, because as we've seen, Exidor has gone through various beliefs, including believing in O.J. Simpson. This time, as we know from the synopsis, he's preaching reincarnation. He says that we've all lived before, and we shall all be born again. Mork says this is the ultimate deja vu.
In a previous life, I was a very famous person. Guess who?
Are you now? Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
Just to meet girls.
Are you currently in a Broadway show?
No.
Are you bigger than the bread box?
Yes.
I've got it. You're the editor of the National Enquirer.
He's not dead.
I can wait.
Exidor says that he was Julius Caesar. He still has laurel leaves right around the ear, and there's even a little bit of mulch. He knows he's Julius Caesar because he gets stabbing pains every Ides of March. Mork introduces Bob, and Exidor thinks that it's a fuzzy Tootsie Roll, maybe because it's in the candy dish. Then Exidor realizes that this is no ordinary caterpillar. This is Abraham Lincoln. When Mork questions this, he says, "Is that the face of someone who would tolerate slavery?" And Mork says that's not her face, so Exidor thinks that she was smiling at him. Exidor has to go, but he says he'll be coming back if you catch his drift. And Mindy enters in a blouse and slacks. Exidor thinks that she's Cleopatra, and he introduces himself as Julie. When Mindy doesn't know what to make of this, Exidor says how quickly they forget, and he exits. Mindy thinks Exidor's robes look strangely familiar. Mork says they ought to be after what she and Mark Anthony did to him. She and that asp of hers. Mindy says between Mork's friends and his pets, she wonders if he's really an advanced alien being or just an intergalactic bozo. He does little computer sounds, and the answer is both. He says that Bob is hungry, and he wonders if there's anything green in the icebox. And I thought it was interesting that he said icebox, which is a pretty old-fashioned term for refrigerator. I don't know where he picked that up. She says there's last month's cottage cheese. He says leafy green is better than lumpy green, but he'll give it a try. She says she's going to be late for class, and she says maybe he can get something for Mr. Bickley. Mork says he already had his shots. She says, I mean food, silly, and she exits. A few things going on in that scene. One is that Bob's gender identity changes throughout the episode. He's named the caterpillar Bob, but refers to her mostly as she, which is a little bit similar to when he wanted to adopt the male baby and call it after Mindy. The caterpillar is also sometimes referred to as it and he, and it changes without really any explanation. Also, when the caterpillar is seen as female, it's presented as a romantic rival for Mindy. And the other thing is that we have Exidor coming back. Although they don't applaud when he arrives, they do applaud when he exits, as they will do in his later scene. And we have a little bit of Mindy going to school, and we learn that she's learning French. And there's quite a bit of Mork speaking French, as he often does, but we'll soon see that he doesn't actually understand it. She says it. We get another nighttime exterior of the house, and this time we go to Mr. Bickley's apartment. Mr. Bickley questions why Mork would have a bug for a pet. Mork says he pulled out a thorn of his, Bob's paw, and then the other 13 legs followed him home. Mork says Bob is clever, leaf-broken, and a skilled mime. He tells Bob to do the caterpillar walking against the wind. Mr. Bickley says bugs can't do diddly.
Now, a dog is something you can train. Look, Bicky. Oh, sweetheart. Bicky can do lots of tricks. You can train him to do anything. Look, he can wave. Wave, Bicky. He can salute. He can pledge allegiance.
Oh, yeah? Bob can pledge allegiance to 14 countries at once.
Bicky can sit up and beg.
Well, Bob doesn't have to. She's independently wealthy.
So we have Mr. Bickley referring to Bob as she, even though Mork had just referred to Bob as he. And we can see that his interaction with Bicky is still very cute. Mr. Bickley says that if Mork puts Bob on a rug, it'll look like a cigarette burn.
I'm a busy man. I'm having my dinner, and I don't have to sit around and listen while you try to convince me that your insipid bug is superior to my stupid dog.
Oh, really? You shouldn't say that. Bob, no, down, Bob, down, Bob.
I don't want to listen to any more of this inane conversation about insects.
Are you implying that you want me to bug off?
Right.
All right. Hope you realize, Mr. Bickley, that you're being awfully cruel. You're hurting the feelings of another life form.
Okay, I'll be good. Your pet Bob has one worthwhile use.
What's that?
He'd make a great bookmark.
And they're back to calling Bob he. We get yet another nighttime exterior of the house, and Mindy is in the same outfit she wore to class. She's obviously going to night school. These first few scenes of the episode are all taking place in the same evening. Mindy says, "Where is the other woman?" And Mork says, "Shh, she's asleep."
A brand new combination log cabin and condominium. See? I built her a little hot tub and some lawn furniture. Over here's a little chaise lounge, and inside she has a beetle for a chauffeur, a dragonfly for a hairdresser. She's got a little vicious watch hand to protect her property. See? It always goes for the toes. There, he's inside. And tomorrow I'm going to take her to see the movie The Swarm because Bob says she knows one of the stunt bees personally.
The condo and the furniture are all very cute. And I'll mention that the movie about killer bees called The Swarm came out in 1978. Mindy says that Mork certainly is being nice to Bob. She can see why Bob looks up to Mork. Mork says that Bob looks up to everybody. Mindy says not everybody's that nice to their pets. Tomorrow, Mork is going to take Bob on a crawl. She loves the outdoors, so he's taking her to Mindy's philodendron so that Bob can feel a little dirt between her toes. And he asks Mindy about her French class.
Come see, come saw.
What's that mean? You hear that, Bob? Come see, come saw mean I do that, too. Bob, you gotta wake up now, sleepyhead. Come on, you can't sleep your whole life away. Time for a little yoga. Let's go. Bob? Nova. Come on, Bob. Come on.
What are you doing?
I'm giving you cardiopulmonary resuscitation. It's too late. Bob's dead.
CPR first was developed in the 19th century, but it wasn't promoted to the public until the 1970s. The fact that Mork has to say cardiopulmonary resuscitation rather than simply CPR shows that it was still a fairly novel concept in 1979. We get still another nighttime exterior of the house. Mork and Mindy are sitting on the couch. Off and on in this scene, Mindy is knitting, and it's not referred to, but I assume this is a skill that she learned from her grandmother. Mork says that Bob was so young, so beautiful, and had so much to live for. He was going to buy her those ballet slippers, so probably 7 or 8 pairs, since they can't seem to agree on whether she had 14 or 16 feet. Mindy says even caterpillars have to die. Mork says he has one last hope. Exeter is coming in a minute. He can bring Bob back through reincarnation. Mindy says Mork needs to face facts. Bob is gone for good, and she puts her hand on his shoulder.
Oh, I know. I blame myself. I should have known she was sick when she looked up and went,
Mork, it was only a bug.
what?
I didn't mean that, but it's not your fault that it died.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, you're right. It was your fault, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, you were jealous, weren't you? You had better legs, but she had more of them. But now that she's dead, you want to laugh. Well, go ahead.
What are you saying?
Oh, Minnie. Oh. If this is the emotion of grief, it really stinks.
So now we have Mindy calling Bob it, and I'll note that Mork admires Mindy's legs, although she doesn't have as many as Bob. Even though Mindy was kind of dismissing Mork's grief for Bob because Bob is just a bug, now she's more sympathetic, and she says that Earthlings feel the same way when the pet they love dies. Now Mork says, who says it was love? She was just a stupid bug. And then he immediately regrets that. He says that he worshipped the ground that Bob crawled on. This time Exeter enters without knocking. He came over as soon as he could, so obviously he was worried about Mork, which is kind of nice because Exeter obviously can be pretty self-absorbed. Mork tells him that Abraham Lincoln is dead again.
Excuse me, Mr. Exeter, but what exactly is it that you do?
I'm a spirit migration engineer.
You're a grave robber?
No, that's a body migration engineer.
Exeter says there's still time. They can bring Bob back as a lower life form. Mork wonders what's lower than a caterpillar. Exeter says caterpillar trainee. Exeter is going to use a process formulated scientifically by Dr. Paul Kearns, professor of reincarnation at Colorado Tech. Mindy says, well, as long as it's scientific. I can kind of believe in the 1970s that there would be a professor of reincarnation.
First, we'll do the magic incantation. Repeat after me. Owa, Owa, Tadger,
Tadger,
Kayam. Now repeat it quickly, Mork.
Owa, Tadger, Kayam, Owa, Tadger, Kayam, Owa, Tadger, Kayam, Owa, Tadger.
Mork asks how Exeter can joke at a time like this. Exeter tells him to lighten up because Mork is always so serious. I thought that was nice that we get a more mischievous Exeter here because a lot of times he's deadpan serious, and that was a nice little twist on their friendship. Mork points out that Bob is dead, but Exeter says Bob isn't dead, just preparing for a comeback.
It's now time for the ritual reincarnation boogie. Arise, oh defunct creepy crawler! Arise, oh many-legged cadaver! Well, that's that.
Mork thinks that nothing happened, and Mindy says, "Oh, that's a shocker." Exeter says that Bob has been reincarnated as a cow. Mork worries because Bob, who he refers to as he, will be eaten. Exeter says, "No, she's safe. She's in India. She's sacred." So Mork does an Indian accent as he says, "Holy cow." Exeter says to call him if anybody else he loves dies. Mindy sarcastically says, "Thanks so much for everything." And then Exeter comes over and says, "You used to have the best barge in Egypt." So he's being kind of flirty, but I guess it's based on their past lives. Then he goes over the window and tells some kids to get away from the mule, and he exits to applause again. Mork says that sometimes Exeter can have Swiss cheese for brains. He wants Mindy to tell him the truth. Bob is gone forever, isn't she? And Mindy says yes. Mork asks what Earthlings do when their pets die. She says there's usually a little funeral, and then they flush them, and then she has to stop herself and say that we buried them. Mork wants to do this for Bob, and she says sure, and they'll talk about it tomorrow. Mork has to get started notifying 86 million next of kin. He grabs a bug that's flying by and says, "Bob's dead, pass it on." Then we get a daytime exterior, and it's of a mortuary. Herman, the mortician, is on the phone in his office. He tells the person, "How about late August? It's usually pretty dead around here." That is an indication of how callous he is. Mork enters without knocking. Herman says into the phone, "Talk to you later, Jim. Just got a vertical." Again, very callous and business-oriented. And then he puts on his mortician act, and he asks if he can be of assistance. Mork asks if this is a place where you bring the dead. Herman says those who have passed into spirit are always welcome here. Mork says he doesn't know if she passed into spirit, but she has croaked. Herman has him sit down.
Was the deceased a relative of yours?
No, I only knew her a few days.
Oh, well, you're very kind to be making arrangements for her everlasting peace.
Well, it's the least I could do. We lived together.
Oh, I see. Well, not to worry. We here at the Herman Funeral Home, we don't make judgments on our clients' lifestyles. What was her name?
Bob?
I see. And the last name?
I don't know. Last names weren't important to us.
I can imagine.
We've got a little bit of this 70s thing of somebody pretending not to be shocked and trying to be non-judgy, but we'll soon see that, of course, he is very judgy, which is understandable because Mork says some things not just about living in sin, but some more outrageous things as we go along. Herman says he assumes that he would want Bob, as he puts it, because of course he's also a little bit scandalized that there's a woman named Bob, to have the best. Mork says that sounds wonderful. Herman asks about the epitaph. Mork suggests espresso followed by shrimp cocktails, so I guess it's aperitif he's thinking of. Herman sighs wearily and asks what he wants written on the headstone. Mork says, "Here lies Bob, she's dead." Herman says it's a beautiful sentiment, and it's totally accurate. Herman starts adding up a simple wreath, a small spray of flowers, pallbearers, the basic ceremony, and a compact hearse. Since he doesn't know Bob as a caterpillar, I think the compact has more to do with compacts being an economy car. He says that this adds up to $2,800, which would be the equivalent of $99.81 and 72 cents in current money. Mork is surprised that it costs money to die. Herman says only if you want to die decently. Mork defensively says that Bob died great, and there's nothing Herman can do to make her feel any better. He says the point is to make Mork feel better.
Well, the only way I'll feel better if Bob stays with me forever and ever. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. Keep her with me in my room. Keep her with you in your...
Herman was played by George Pentecost, who was the maitre d' on Mork's Mixed Emotions, and he'd have another role in season 4. I think that the casting here is a little bit better because he just has that kind of face and persona that fits an insincere mortician. It's not a great performance, but it's pretty good. They are making the point that Jessica Mitford had made in the 60s with The American Way of Death, that funerals and mortuary services are often very overpriced and they take advantage of the grieving loved ones left behind. I thought that was nice. There's a little bit of gentle satire there. At the same time, we have him understandably being revolted by the idea that Mork is going to have a dead woman in his bedroom. Then we get a daytime exterior of the house. Mr. Bickley complains that this is some cocktail party. He wonders where the pretzels are. It turns out that Mork sent him a card saying that he was having a cocktail party. Mork comes down from the attic and he says that he knew Mr. Bickley wouldn't come if he told him that it was a funeral. Mr. Bickley wonders who died, and Mork says it was dear departed Bob. Mr. Bickley says that he thought she killed over weeks ago, so that's a nice little bit of exposition.
Renewed sorrow, anguish, and assorted other emotions.
Mindy says that Mork has been keeping that thing in his pocket. She finally convinced him it was time to put poor old Bob to rest. Mindy wants Mr. Bickley to stay, though he says he doesn't go to bug wakes. Mindy says that Mork really loved that bug. For afterwards, she's got a bottle of Mr. Bickley's favorite snack. So she knows the way to bribe him is to offer alcohol, and it works, although he says that he doesn't want to view the body. We get a close-up of a matchbox on a tray with lit birthday candles. The matchbox says, "Be a computer programmer. Learn at home. Name upon request school of home study." It just flashes by really quick, but I thought that was funny. This box is serving as the casket.
What can you say about a caterpillar? Bob was all that and more. She was a friend, a joy, an inspiration. Bob will never do the thing she dreamed of now that she's Stiff City. Not going to be easy to follow in her footsteps, but tomorrow, 7 of us are going to try. All I have to say in closing is, if you know Bobby, like I know Bobby, oi, 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 what a bug. And now to say a few words, a fine upstanding Shiksa in her own right. Personal friend of mine and Bobby's, Mindy. McConnell, please come on.
So again, we get Mork using the phrase Stiff City to refer to death, although this time it's somebody that he really cared about. I'm not sure how many people get the George Jessel impression. It was pretty much a laugh getter at that time. In the 70s and possibly in the 60s, George Jessel was an entertainer who was known for giving speeches, and this was one of Robin Williams's standard imitations, although probably not as recognizable now as, for instance, Peter Lorre or Jack Nicholson. As near as I can tell, it was dead on, but I think I grew up more hearing people imitate or talk about George Jessel, might have been also jokes on Welcome Back, Kotter, if I remember correctly, than actually hearing George Jessel himself. So it was kind of second or third hand with that. You can definitely see Pam Dauber try not to laugh, which is okay because that feels in character for Mindy, that she would not want to laugh at this funeral but would have trouble not laughing. And meanwhile, Mr. Bickley is just staring in disbelief. I'll note that Mork refers to Mindy as a Shiksa, which fits with George Jessel being Jewish, since Shiksa means a non-Jewish girl or woman. Although this term for Mindy would just take on a life of its own in later seasons. Mindy is very surprised and reluctant about being asked to speak about Bob. But she stands up and she says that although she and Bob lived under the same roof, they didn't know each other well. Mindy is even afraid of spiders, which I don't know if that came up before. We cut to Mr. Bickley just continuing to stare in disbelief, and you can kind of see Robin Williams about to break, which is not in character for Mork, who should be grief-stricken, of course.
Thank you, Mindela. And now, a man who is said to have the warmth of a snow pea, Mr. Bickley. Mr. Bickley, a few words I'm saying upon you, Mr.
With heavy heart and mournful eyes and tears that softly flow, we say our final sad goodbyes to a fuzzy escargot. dog slop. When I first met Bob, I had no way of knowing she was on her last legs. But I realized she was a good pet. Not as good as a dog, though. A dog can hop up on your bed and snuggle his cute little face next to you in the bed and softly whimper when he's hungry and put his little paw in yours as though to say, I love you, Daddy. Oh, I can't take it anymore. I'm coming, Vicky. Daddy's coming. Daddy's coming.
And now, it's time for the burial.
The Mindela is sort of like a Jewish term of endearment, adding the Allah to a name. And you can see that Robin Williams is definitely very close to breaking character. And we get Mr. Bickley sort of doing an impromptu poem like on one of his greeting cards, so I thought that was nice. And it's sweet to see his love for his puppy. Mork starts a slow funeral procession. Mindy touches his back to get him to go faster, so he says they'll do the Evelyn Wood version, which refers to the Evelyn Wood speed reading course. They start walking faster, and they end up over by the philodendron, which will be Bob's final resting place. Mork opens the casket, but he says, "Who are you, and what have you done with Bob?" Mindy says that Bob has turned into a butterfly, and Mork should take her to the window. Mindy says Bob wasn't dead, she was just changing. Caterpillars turn into butterflies. So Mork says he'll set her free. Now, I don't know why at no point in the episode did Mindy not point out this basic fact of entomology. They do something interesting where we never actually see the caterpillar, and I think we have to assume Mindy didn't see the cocoon. Mork was mostly keeping Bob inside of various containers. So I'll allow that, and we know from what Mr. Bickley said at the beginning of the scene that a few weeks have passed, so that's enough time for Bob to change.
There we go, Bob. Fly, Bob. Be free. There you go, Bob. Oh, she was beautiful.
Mindy wonders if now Mork will believe what Exodus said about reincarnation, because we see a caterpillar transforming into a new sort of being. Mork says no. He still thinks that Exodus has his hand up his foot, which I thought was a nice bit of cleaning up that language. But Mork does believe that maybe when you die, something beautiful happens. Mindy says that's a nice thought.
Hey, let's go follow Bob.
All right. I could have made it.
We get one more nighttime exterior of the house, and I don't know if it's that evening or another day. Mork repeatedly calls Orson and eventually says, "Yo, Battlestar Gigantica," which is a play on the series Battlestar Galactica, which was on ABC from 1978 to 79, and of course came back in various forms through the decades. Mork says this week he's learned many wonderful things, including the meaning of "you can't take it with you." He says he went to a funeral home. Orson asks if this is where they put old funerals. Mork calls him an old gobbler and says he gets half a laugh for that, so he does half of his bark laugh. And I thought that was interesting that Orson is mellowed enough. He's actually telling a joke on purpose. Mork says that a funeral is like a track meet, but then he lists things that have nothing to do with a track meet. You have to wear black, you don't need a stopwatch, and one of the guys is really lousy in a relay race. Orson says that Mork really has a way with words. Mork says, "Thank you, Your Immenseness," and he says that Orson should have heard the eulogy he gave.
Mindy says that when he dies, he'll go to heaven and be with all the other bugs, and he'll be very happy, and everything will be beautiful.
Tell me, if heaven is so beautiful, so perfect, so great, how come humans don't want to die?
Who wants to be with all those bugs?
What do you think happens when something dies, Mork?
I don't know, sir. All I know is that when my caterpillar became a butterfly and sprouted wings and flew away, it looked kind of like a little angel. See you next week. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no.
So Mork says that he'll talk to Orson next week, but it would be several months before we would get into the next episode. This was the season closer, and it's kind of an odd note to go out on, but in other ways it's not. It does feel funny that we don't have Fred and Cora, and to a lesser extent Eugene, but I thought it was nice that we get Exodore and Mr. Bickley, although not together, which would be very interesting in itself. There's sort of Mork learning more about different emotions, including really processing grief in a way that he couldn't earlier in the season. Mindy being kind of playful and teasing with him, but also, of course, still very warm and sympathetic. I was actually leaning towards a 2.5 on this, on the 0 to 4 egg scale, which measures how well an episode fits what I'm looking for on the series. But I actually enjoyed the episode more the second time through when I was taking notes, and so I'm going with a 3 egg. I think that the scene with the funeral and what happens after is really nice. It's funny and sweet. It's cool to see them struggle to stay in character. And it is a really lovely message with the symbol of a butterfly and the idea that there's something beautiful happening to you after death, whether you believe in heaven or not. I thought that was sweet and touching. I do have to say, though, the episode is pretty slow. Maybe that fits the theme of death, but it's not one of the manic episodes. The title feels a little bit odd because, of course, Mindy is Mork's best friend. I think it would have worked better to say Mork's new friend, but I understand they were trying to emphasize how attached he became to Bob during their brief time together. I also rate these episodes on a 0 to 4 heart scale for how shippy it gets regarding Mork and Mindy. It's not an episode with kissing or dancing, but there's a lot of gentle little touches. Like I said, some sympathy. He admires her legs. He's trying to treat Bob like a romantic rival, like he's trying to make Mindy jealous or something, and so she says, "Where's the other woman?" It's not particularly a strongly shippy episode. I would say a 1.5. I will have a season 1 review where I will talk about the trends in general and what my favorite episodes were. For now, I will say that it's not a bad way to wrap things up. There are definitely areas that they could have kept exploring along these same lines, with Mork learning about human emotions and rituals. That's not quite what happened, as we know. In the meantime, this episode, 24, Mork's best friend, gets 3 eggs, 1.5 hearts. See you, if not next week, soon enough. This is Paula Schaffner. Nanu, Nanu.
In a gobble of Frida, honey, don't you know that I'm loving you? In a gobble of Frida, baby, don't you know that I'll always be true?